struck by a double dose of drought and destructive algae. We'll get to that story shortly. For now, the U.S. state of Missouri, which was rocked by months of protests against police brutality, has seen a fresh surge of unrest this week. Angry protesters have rallied in downtown St. Louis for victims of law enforcement abuse and against the impunity for police officers. Protesters were blocking traffic. 2 were arrested, including a freelance journalist who was released soon after. And a demonstration in the suburb of Ferguson saw 2 police officers shot early on Thursday. That moment caught on video. The shooting happened hours after the city's police chief announced his resignation. He became the 6th Ferguson official to leave office since the killing of unarmed black teen Michael Brown. There have been flashpoints of tension since the chief made the decision to step down. And the U.S. state of Wisconsin has become another place where the public has been raising the alarm over race and policing. More than 1,000 protesters occupied Madison City Hall on Monday in the wake of another deadly shooting of a mixed-race teen by a white policeman. The angry crowd of mostly students vented anger at the police, demanding justice for 19-year-old Tony Robinson, who was killed more than a week ago. A massive rally was also held outside the building, with protesters chanting "Black Lives Matter." That phrase was adopted by a nationwide movement against police brutality, launched in response to the police killings of black people. Tracy Siska from the Chicago Justice Project believes the gung-ho attitude of heavily armed police is only worsening the situation.
In America, we're really good at ignoring poverty and ignoring racism and segregation. And then when we have these communities that haven't had jobs for 20 or 30 years, we throw a bunch of white cops into black areas that are incredibly poor and marginalized and tell them to solve the problems. And that is never going to be a solution. The local police department's really being given too many military equipment, too many military tactics, being forced into, since 9/11 here in the U.S., being forced into intelligence gathering operations. And all of that has pushed the police into being something they're not, which is kind of like a intelligence force.
You're watching The Weekly on RT International as we highlight the top worldwide headlines of the past 7 days. We're back in just a sec.
On March 18th, 1965, the planet watched breathlessly as one man took his first steps into open space.
Welcome to the program here on RT International. The EU has been mulling over the idea of a joint army for the entire bloc. The scheme was put forward by the President of the European Commission 1 week ago. Germany has backed the proposal, with its defense minister saying a European army is the future. However, some of the bloc's members have been wary of the plan. In fact, back in 2013, the idea was blocked by the UK.
It isn't right for the European Union to have capabilities, armies, air forces and the rest of it.
That opinions are shared by the Eurosceptics, who say a joint army would only actually harm security on the continent.
All countries have an army, their own or someone else's. Now Brussels wants its own army. Do you think this is a good idea?
Critics claim there's no need for a European army when there's already NATO's security structure in place.
Following a United Nations request in 2008, NATO deployed a naval force to the region to escort ships that were carrying humanitarian aid to Somalia under the World Food Programme.
Well, the EU has also been fighting piracy off the Somali coast. The bloc sent its naval forces to the area in 2008 as well. The The first EU combat deployment has been criticised for spending money on a mission that's already being fully carried out by NATO.
We had a counter-piracy operation which was Atalanta. In fact, an operation of the European Union as a whole, but at the same time we had the Operation Ocean Shield that was fostered by NATO. That's duplication, that's something that we should avoid.
The joint EU army would certainly send a strong signal to Moscow. That's according to the idea's author, Jean-Claude Juncker. That's what NATO was doing this week, with the US sending tanks to Estonia and Latvia for drills on Russia's doorstep. And the mayor of Riga seized the opportunity to snap a selfie with one of the tanks. He shared on Twitter what he described as an unconventional start to the week. The reinforcements will take part in NATO military exercises in May. The bloc has been stepping up drills in the region, claiming Russia could try to invade all these NATO countries. Russia has condemned the scaremongering. Let's take a look at some examples of the bloc's increased activity on Russia's border. This right here. Last weekend's show of military hardware in Estonia, with NATO combat vehicles and soldiers taking part. Also, a train right there loaded with U.S. equipment arrived in neighboring Lithuania in January as U.S. troops stepped up their training there. And another train loaded with military cargo from Washington was spotted in Latvia last December. Let's show you Poland from last May, hosting large-scale NATO exercises.
I think it increases tensions in the sense that for the United States to insert this kind of force in the Baltic states, again, right on Russia's doorstep, simply, I think, adds insult to injury to the fact that we have expanded NATO so extensively in Russia's direction, not for any legitimate security purpose, but simply because we can. It looked like a cost-free exercise at the time it was done. Now the tensions are rising between the United States and Russia. There are costs associated with it. It does contribute to a kind of hair-trigger atmosphere, which is in nobody's interest.
Poland will also host NATO military drills again in the summer. Meanwhile, the country's defense minister has become, well, he got a bit confused, shall we say, after he tried to address those in attendance at a military conference. Have a look here. Yeah, that's not a microphone, that's a light. Anyway, the minister was about to address the country's president and the top military brass when he just couldn't really tell which one was which. He then started his speech unfazed by the bright light beaming into his eyes. Some noted, though, that, well, actually, the good of it is the minister literally shed light on some aspects of the Polish military.